Tom literally woke him up out of bed to basically tell him that he needs to listen to us. We're gonna send him a CD. He needs to listen to us, and he needs to sign us.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Dynamite Boy was a pop-punk band from Austin, Texas. They were comprised of Sean, Dusty, Adrian, and Sam. Allegedly, they disbanded in 2005 after a 10-year career. However, due to recent posts on the band's MySpace, this is unsure. They have reunited for one-off shows between 2006 and 2008. So I just got this right off from Wikipedia. And you know that this has got to be old because they're mentioning MySpace. So, Adrian, you may want to update this because that was awesome. I saw Dynamite Boy at the Burnersville Church in like 98, 99. That was the only time I saw them, but they were this band that came in, and I talk about this in the interview, but I wasn't sure who they were, and I'm not sure if anyone there knew who they were, but they just took, the quote-unquote stage, which was really the floor. They started playing, and I remember that the crowd just went nuts, and then they just kind of left and just took off in this really awesome direction, which you'll hear about in this interview. But I wanted to talk to these guys because it kind of falls into that whole Fearless catalog that was so in our face back in that time, especially because we had Bigwig from Jersey and they were on Fearless. And I've done a bunch of interviews with bands that were on Fearless, like Beefcake, and I also talked to Serial Killer Clothing, Joanna, and they had a connection with Fearless. So there's this like Fearless world that exists that's been on this podcast. I want to kind of keep expanding on that. So if you know of any other bands that I haven't interviewed yet that were on that label in that time period, definitely reach out to me at thiswasthescene@gmail.com. But I reached out to Monkey, who's the roadie extraordinaire, who was episode 6 on the podcast. And I was like, I need a connection to Dynamite Boy. And he said, hold on one second. And he connected me with Adrian Munoz, and I got him on the Skype, and this is what we talked about. Craig from The Impossibles, the Burnersville Church show that I was just talking about, getting on Fearless Records, using Jim Cherry's bass to record Finders Keepers, his thoughts on Somewhere in America, their relationship with Fearless, keeping up with the early 2000s, Sean quitting the band, his story that you definitely don't want to miss. It's like right towards the end. It's fucking awesome. And a ton more. Couple things. Next week, I launch my new animated short series starting with He Saraceno from Midtown's interview, episode 003 or episode 3. This is the part in his interview where he talks about the time they almost got carjacked. This isn't going to be a weekly series because it takes me a long time to create this, but I started this back in November, and ever since the beginning of this podcast, which was March 22nd, 2018, I've always wanted to take certain clips from episodes and visualize them through animation because my full-time career is an animator. If you go to drive80.com, drive80.com, that's my own company that I've had since 2011. That's what I do to actually make money, which I do explainer videos. I actually do Instagram stickers now for B2C companies and realtors. So if you're a realtor and you are promoting the shit out of yourself on Instagram stories, I can make you custom stickers that go into stories to help you brand that. Little plug there. I also do logo animations and software and app demos. So just throwing it out there. But I've always wanted to take these clips, like I said, and animate them. And I finally started to do it in November, and it just took me so long to get this thing out. And it wasn't because it took me 6 months to animate it. You'll see, because it's like stick figures basically. And I took a very, very dumbed down approach to make this thing try to go fast, but I just kept getting in my own way and stopping the project and starting it and stopping it. And last week I was like, I'm going to fucking finish this. And I finally did. And it's really funny. So next Wednesday, 7/15/2020, July 15, 2020, I'll be launching it. It's only like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. But again, it's just a clip from the interview. So I hope that people enjoy it because I'm going to do more of these because I have so many interviews to go back to and visualize these stories. And I'm going to have them all hosted on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thiswasthescene. And that's all I'm going to say. So I'll stop talking about that. Also, thank you to everyone who keeps sending me messages. I'm really awful at knowing how to reply. So I'm typically like, thank you or ha, thanks. Like, I don't know how to genuinely reply, but I genuinely am appreciative of what you have said and the stories you've sent me. Even though I might come across short, I hope that doesn't come across like I'm a dick and I don't care. Like I really do care. I just don't know how to respond. So if anyone sends me messages, I truly, truly care. And I've wanted to say this for a while because it really means something. And the fact that people share this and they go out of their way to tell me how much they love this podcast, it's just awesome. And you can't really get that across in text. So I figured me saying it is a lot more genuine. So every single fucking person that sent me a message on Instagram, on Twitter, through an email, in Facebook, like everyone, it's thank you. It's so fucking awesome that you took the time to do that. So thank you very much. Before I get into it, go to housemerch.com. If you're looking for some band merch, you can get 10% off by using the code SCENE, SCENE. You also get free shipping. The prices are super low compared to other websites that sell band merch. So again, you get an extra 10% off. Use the code SCENE, free shipping. Go check it out. And yes, thank you to Patreon supporters who keep this alive. If you want to sign up for Patreon, it's patreon.com/thiswasthescene, or you can go to the website, thiswasthescene.com. There's a Patreon button. There's also a donate button on thiswasthescene.com if you want to have a one-time donation, and you can also buy merch. And the merch is taking a bit of time because I have a Fulfill On Demand website that I use, and they've been backed up because of this whole fucking pandemic thing, but it will come, and the quality is great. So all those resources are really helpful to keep this alive. And that's it. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who loves some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Basically, like all the information that I have is on Wikipedia, so these interviews help people get a little bit more info about that time.
Yeah, for the most part, Wikipedia is accurate. There's definitely stuff that's like past members that aren't in there, but it's, you know, it is what it is. I was there for a majority of it.
So let's go back in time. Let's go back to when you were a kid, and like what got you, like what music or music video got your attention where you were like, shit, I gotta start paying attention to this whole music thing.
Oh man. So funny enough, you know, my mom is who I spent most of my childhood years. My mom, my older sister, my parents split up when I was younger. So like I literally I have only memories of being a child with my mom and the kind of music she listened to. You know, my mom was, at the time, she was dating a guy that was like 6-7 years younger than her. And I think he kind of got her into, you know, like just old school, like metal, you know, like old school Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer. So growing up, I mean, that's really like majority of the music that I was exposed to was, you know, just like old school metal and like rock and roll, AC/DC. So that's kind of like where my influence comes in of being into rock and all the rock genres of music. Eventually, you know, kind of going into teenage years, I got more into really just even more hardcore metal. Like I think Pantera was the first band that kind of introduced me into the heavier side. And then I just went off the deep end, dude. When I was in high school, I started getting into like straight like death metal and black metal and stuff. You know, it was, I guess you would call it a phase, but I think it's one of those like times of your life where you change direction to like one extreme point and you get influences from that style of music, but then you kind of find your way back to having a more open mind of like punk rock music, because I mean really that's kind of like the birth of it in a lot of those bands, especially like Metallica and stuff. So that's kind of, you know, it's funny because when I was like, I think maybe 14, 15, I was into Green Day for the longest time. Green Day was probably the first like real like quote unquote punk band that I got into. But then that was before I kind of hit my death metal phase. Well, coming out of my death metal phase, my older brother, he was into straight punk rock, like, you know, listened to like Dead Kennedys, and, you know, he listened to a lot of Fat Records band too, but like he was kind of like all over the place when it comes to different eras and different genres of punk rock. So I was always exposed to that when I was around him. And when I was in high school, I was so hardcore into metal and death metal that, you know, my best friend and I at the time, anytime we were riding in the car with my brother and he'd be listening to like No Effects, we'd be like, "Oh, this is terrible," you know. But it was only because we were trying to be super hard. But eventually, it started rubbing off on me.
So wait, were you all like, I wouldn't say, I mean, goth really was different, but did you dress like all sorts of like just that style too?
Not extreme, like Scandinavian like black metal bands or something where they
Yeah.
had like painted faces and shit. It wasn't that extreme, but I definitely had like long hair, wore all black jeans, death metal shirt. And my friend and my best friend and I at the time, we were always known as like the scary dudes at school. We'd be sitting in the cafeteria during lunch, and we were always, they always had like kind of like the freak table at lunch.
Yeah, yeah.
So my friend and I would always sit at that table at the end, but we didn't even really talk to everybody else at the table. That's just the only table we fit in with. But we were like the dudes that were just quiet at the end of the table with our hair in our face, barely saying a word, with like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide shirts on.
Wow. Sacrificing things. Just
yeah. So basically my brother kind of got me into more like punk rock at the time, even though I had technically already listened to some of that growing up as a kid because my mom listened to it. I liked some stuff, but once I kind of went down that path and started listening to more punk rock, I got more into like Fat Records bands. Like that was kind of like those were my favorite bands, like Strung Out, No Use for a Name, Propagandhi. Those are like my main bands that I was really into.
Do you think it was because there's the transition? I mean, it's an interesting transition because you're going to more of a softer side, but Strung Out, they were more of like a metally punk band. So do you think like the bridge was like the solos and the riffs and things like that, and the speed?
Absolutely, because it was the best of both worlds. I'd come from metal, and then I'd hear like punk rock that I didn't really care for, like Rancid. At the time, I liked Rancid. I liked Rancid eventually, but like at the beginning, Rancid was just, there was nothing that appealed to me because of what I was used to, like really technical guitar playing and drumming and like harsh vocals and stuff. That's why I think I gravitated more towards those styles, like those kind of Fat Records, like technical metal influenced punk rock, because it still had a little bit of that element in it.
So did you, at this time, because Dynamite Boy was based out of Austin, right?
Yeah.
And now, did you grow up in Austin?
Yeah. I was born in San Antonio, which is about like an hour and a half south. But yeah, I moved here with my family when I was like 2. So really pretty much just grew up in Austin my whole life.
I actually lived in Austin for a minute in 2015. I was traveling around and I lived in South Austin. So I was right below,
okay.
Yeah, I was right below Slaughter.
Oh yeah, that's south.
Yeah, I lived in, each week I was moving around Austin. So I was south, I was right around there, and then I was up, what the fuck coffee shop was that? You're still in Austin right now, right?
Well, I mean, I'm in Cedar Park, but that's basically Austin.
So do you know, ever been to Radio, the coffee shop?
Yeah.
So I think they had just opened recently when I had moved there, but I was like right down the street from there for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to just say
Yeah,
that
a friend
there.
of mine, my best friend, he owns a chain of food trucks here called Arlo's. It's like a vegan food truck.
Okay.
And I think he had a trailer, he had a food truck at that Radio location for a bit. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I love that town. So like, I mean, obviously it's way more packed now than when you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but growing up then, like how did you get involved in like the scene? Like, how did you go from black metal to Fat Records bands and then start going to local shows?
Yeah. So funny enough, my brother is kind of the one who introduced me to the scene because, since, the music he was listening to at the time influenced me. Cause that's what older siblings do. You kind of follow them. I started playing guitar and drums when I was like 10. I had a drum set in my room when I was like 10 years old. We lived in Round Rock, which is another like outskirt of Austin. Throughout my grade school years, I played drums and guitar. I mean, it was terrible because I was, a kid, but, I kind of taught myself, once I actually learned how to play guitar, play drums by watching like Metallica videos and Sepultura videos.
Wow.
And then getting into punk rock. I had moved because basically my brother and I lived with my dad we finally lived with my dad instead of my mom when we were in our grade school years. And that's when we moved to Round Rock with him. Well, once when I turned 16, I basically moved back in with my mom and moved back to Austin. And that's when my brother started getting into more of the local scene and like, befriending local bands. Well, I think at the time, Dynamite Boy wasn't around yet. It's funny because Sean, our singer, he was in a band called Zap that was basically like almost like it's kind of the same style of Dynamite Boy at the time, but a little more quirky. And then also he was in another band called Chore Boy, which was a mix of, he played guitar in the band, and then it was like members of the band Screw. Have you heard of Screw before?
No.
They're basically like an industrial metal band. Basically like Ministry style,
like
band.
Stabbing Westward and shit like that, or like
kind of
harder.
It's a little more like Ministry, where Ministry was a little bit more like hardcore.
Yeah, they were more scary.
Yeah, kind of scary industrial metal band. So he was in a band called Troy Boy that was more like straight just punk rock stuff. But my brother became friends with a lot of people in that scene, including Sean. And I remember the first time my brother took me to a show, it was to see Zap, Sean's band at the time, our singer's band at the time. And it was at some like outside, like some kind of festival, like some like mini festival where it was like an outside show. I think I was like 16, maybe 17. So this was back in 98, like probably early 98. From there, that's kind of where I was introduced to certain people, became friends through my brother with certain people, and then eventually my brother ended up talking to some guys that were in this band at the time called Little Boy Henry, who was a straight up punk, like just punk band, kind of like Rancid, Swinging Utters style, like punk band from McAllen, Texas, which is like deep South Texas, like border town pretty much. My brother ended up finding out that they were looking for a drummer, and I was more of a drummer at that time. He told them, he said, man, if y'all are looking for a drummer, my brother can play drums and he's really good. Like he can totally play like punk rock stuff. So he kind of put he put it in their ear, but when they kind of found out how old I was at the time, that I was like 16, they're like, he's a little young. We kind of want somebody that's a little bit older. Well, one day, this is crazy. One day I went to a local music store in like downtown Austin. It's a chain of music stores here called Straight Music. I don't know if you ever went there when you were here.
Was it on what street was it on? Was it in?
So they used to have one downtown.
Yeah.
But that one closed, and then they opened up a location in South Austin, like off of Ben White and Lamar.
No, but I know those streets just from being there. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a Straight Music there, and then there's also one up here, up north, around closer to where I live. But it's like the known local music store, that's not like a big corporate chain.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go there one day, because as a kid, a teenager, you always like to go to the music stores and like try out the guitars and just like mess around with the instruments and stuff. So that's what I was doing. Went to the downtown location, and I was in the amp room. I got a guitar, went in the amp room, and I was in there like playing, like strung out and no effects on guitar. And there's a dude behind me. He turns around and he's like, "Hey man, you in a band?" I'm like, "Well, no, I'm just, I just play music, And so to make a long story short, this guy, Dustin, he was friends with all of those guys in Little Boy Henry, which then basically got him to go tell them like, "Hey, this guy met, his name's Adrian, his brother's Angel. You guys already know him. He's like he can play guitar really well, and he said he plays drums." So it kind of just came back to them basically being like somebody else that they know personally, like, "Hey, this guy's like really talented. You should you guys should definitely check him out and see if he can play. So what the funny thing about that is the Dustin that I was in that amp room with, he was the guitarist for the band that eventually became Riddlin' Kids. Do you know who Riddlin' Kids is?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mean, they were like
they were a fat band, weren't they? Or yeah, wasn't that the band that goddamn it, the drummer who's in Lagwagon now, wasn't that his first band?
No. So Riddlin' Kids they were
Oh,
basically
that's LSD, whatever the fuck that band was. I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah, I've heard of Riddlin' Kids.
That's
So.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Riddlin' Kids basically they had like one they just kind of like got really big. They had like one single. They had gotten like major label attention. But anyway, long story short, I mean that was further down the road. But anyway, so Dustin went back to these guys and basically were like, you guys should check this guy out. So then they contacted my brother, told my brother to basically tell me like, hey, have your brother come in and we'll see if he can play. So that's kind of where I came in. And what the funny thing is Sean Neal, the singer for Dynamite Boy, he ended up being the guitarist for them too around the same time. So he had just recently joined the band to play guitar. When I came in and played drums, they were like, yeah, this is great. We're good. We're gonna stick with Adrian. He's gonna drum for us or whatever. So that's kind of how that all started. That's how I got introduced to the scene. Really, it's my brother. My brother's the one that kind of made that connection for me and got me introduced to all those people and introduced to Sean, who was the singer.
I'm confused though because you're playing strung out on guitar and this guy talks to you and then you play drums. It's like, hey, I found this great guitar player. We need a drummer, right? Like, how does that transition work?
Well, because in the conversation that I had with him in the amp room, I told him basically like, yeah, I play guitar, but I'm more of a drummer.
Okay.
Like, I'm a better drummer than I am a guitar player. So that's why he went back to them and he was like, well, if you're a better drummer than you are a guitar player, then you must be really good at drums.
Okay. Okay. It's like if you can play strung out on guitar, you could play also really good on drums, then that's going to be key. Especially back then because the fat record beat and a drummer being able to do that and play fast, that was like, gold for bands. Especially finding drummers is a giant pain in the ass to begin with. So if you know that someone can, and I mean, in theory, you told them that you could do that. So he's just kind of like just going on a promise. But the fact that he found that, he's like, okay, well, this guy can play that speed. So that's gonna work out.
Exactly.
I got you.
He was probably thinking he must be good enough to play drums for what my friends are looking for their band. So I'm going to go let them know that I met this guy. Turns out to be the younger brother of a guy we already know. So yeah, that's kind of how all that happened.
So this is the time when South by Southwest had already been going on in Austin, right? Or was it called something different back then?
No, it was good. I can't remember officially the year that South by Southwest started, but yeah, it was definitely going on at this time.
Yeah, because I think when I was in a band called Lanemeyer and we went on tour, starting in '98 we started touring, but I think it was like '99 we played in Austin and we were at Emo's when it was on 6th Street. And that's when South by Southwest was going on. So that's when I first heard about it. So now it's like, it's a global thing. Like everyone fucking knows about it. But like to me, I thought Austin was more, because Jersey was there was a couple clubs, but we were mostly Legion Hall, Fire Hall, church based. It was all local shows that were popping.
Those are my favorite, dude. Those were my favorite.
It was like, that's when bands came through. Like we would take you guys from playing clubs all around town and be like, you're coming into this local scene, and you guys were like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
But it was Austin mostly clubs.
It had that same kind of DIY scene, or that side of the scene too. Like but right before I started playing with bands at the time, there was like a warehouse in like just south of downtown that was kind of in the an industrial area where like they used to have a lot of like hardcore shows, and then they would mix in some like punk rock. But kind of when I started, it definitely became more just venues, like small venues all around town. I mean, that's the thing. Austin is, at the time it was like very, promoted as live music capital of the world. So there was like a shit ton of venues that you could play, you know, even if you were just like a small nobody band. So there wasn't a lot of DIY shows like that were just you know, that people would just rent out a space and they would just throw a show there. But there was definitely at least a few that I remember that I either went to or played.
Like, when you did that though, did you have this drive to want to play in a band and play those shows?
Yeah. I mean, dude, when I was that age, because I was a teenager, and being in a band at all was like my biggest goal. Like when I was, you know, growing up and being so into music that I was, and learning how to play drums and guitar, like all I wanted to do in life was play music. All I wanted to do was be in a band and play for people and be on stage, go on tour. Like that's all I wanted to do. So like, yeah, that's once I was in that scene that I was in, like I was all for playing anywhere and everywhere. I didn't care where it was.
So, and real quick, I just love it. I was thinking Riddling Kids. I was comparing that to Rich Kids on LSD. I just wanted to finish
No.
that thought. That's what I thought, but it was definitely not that. So what was the band again that you and Sean were in before you transitioned later on to Dynamite Boy?
It was called Little Boy Henry before I officially joined the band, but they changed their band name to the Cripples.
Okay.
So it ended up being the Cripples once the band was like officially formed and it had all the members. That's basically what it turned into, was the Cripples.
Well, because Dynamite Boy started without you, and then you joined after. So then how were you in this band with Sean, and then how did like he leave, start that, and like what was that whole thing there before you then joined up with them later on in Dynamite Boy?
Okay, I'm gonna try to make this as simple and as brief as possible, because that's the one thing about the Austin scene is it's very ancestral. Like there's so many different members of different bands that played in this band with this guy and then played in this band with this guy. Like you could go, I mean, the family tree of band members of the scene is like insane. But so basically I joined the Cripples, started playing with them, playing drums. Well, then, and this is relevant because it's probably gonna have, I'm sure I'm gonna talk about this later, but Dustin, the guy I was talking about who was in the band, you know, later, that was in a band called Riddling Kids that got pretty big. They were all roommates, like most of the guys in the Cripples and Dustin and a couple other guys. They were all roommates. It was there's one house with like 4 or 5 guys staying in there. So eventually, you know, Dustin started watching me play drums with them, and he had his own band. He started his own band with some other guys. One day he approached me and he was like, "Hey man, like, we're looking for a drummer too. Like, would you be down to come to our practice and just like, you know, play drums, you know, see if we can like write some stuff?" I was like, all right. And, you know, because like I said, at the time I was young, I was like, dude, I'll be in every band. I don't care. I just want to play music. So yeah, I was like, yeah, man, I'll totally play, you know. So started practicing with them. So I basically ended up being in both bands playing drums. And that band at the time was called Igmo. So I was playing with both bands, and then at one point, you know, this was after the first Dynamite Boy release came out, Hell Is Other People, which was on Off Time Records. So basically, they had a show at the old Emos that was like downtown off of Red River or 6th Street. Well, by that time, the original bassist for Dynamite Boy had left the band. Craig, who was the bassist for The Impossibles, he joined the band, and he was kind of like, I don't think he was ever really officially in the band. I think it kind of seemed like he was a fill-in. Like he was kind of just filling in on bass just to kind of like help them out. Well, at one point they had played a show at Emo's, and I came to the show. By that time, me and Sean and I were really good friends. Sean from Dynamite Boy. So I show up to the show. You know, Sean comes outside of the venue in the little kind of like where the picnic tables, like in the little like it's still the venue, but it was like the outside area. And I'm sitting on a picnic table. He comes out there and he's like, "Hey man, I want to talk to you about something." And I was like, "All right, what's up?" And he's like, "Hey, we're thinking about not having Craig play with us. And I was like, really? Like, I thought he was like in the band. He's like, well, I mean, he kind of is, but it's just not really, for whatever reason, it wasn't working out.
This is Craig, who was in the Impossibles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know what? I'm trying to go off memory. By the way, I have a horrible memory. I have very selective memory. So
it's fine. Pretty much a majority of people that I talk to really have a hard time remembering 20 years ago, but there'll be moments where little things will spark, holy shit, wait, hold on, this is the way it happened.
Okay. So
that's okay. You could be completely lying right now, but it's entertaining.
So let me go back. So scratch that whole emo scene.
Okay.
We'll have to edit that out, because I just realized that I'm talking about, because it's coming back to me as I'm saying. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what happened. What happened was Sean had approached me before that show at Emos that they had, told me about issues that they were having with Craig, that he was like, he was kind of unavailable a lot, couldn't make practices or whatever the case is. So he was basically like, we've got this show at Emos coming up. And I think it was like in 2 weeks or something. It was very last minute that he approached me about it. And he's like, I know you play guitar, and I'm positive you can play bass too. He was like, we don't want Craig to play that show. Well, apparently it turned out he actually wasn't going to be able to, or he led them to believe he wasn't going to be able to. It wasn't like an official thing where he said, I'm not playing. They thought he wasn't going to be able to play. So basically Sean kind of made up his mind, like, you know what, this dude is super unreliable. We're just going to get someone else to play. So that's why he approached me about it. When he approached me about it, and he was basically like, you're going to have like 2 weeks to like learn our songs and play the show. Like, are you down with that? And I was like, hell yeah. Because at the time, Dynamite Boy was like one of those Austin bands that everybody knew in the scene, and everybody loved that band. And I knew it was going to be a really badass show to play. So, I was in. Well, comes time for the show at Emos. I show up with my bass.
You could like see where this is going.
Yeah. So I show up with my bass, and I'm all excited, and I'm outside talking with Sean, and all of a sudden Craig walks in, bass in hand.
Oh no.
Ready to play the show.
Oh no.
And Sean just looks over at him, and he just completely white-faced, like, shit. So he looks at me and he goes, don't worry about it, I'll handle it, I'll be back. So he goes and he takes Craig off somewhere and talks to him or whatever. So basically that was my introduction into the band.
It's so interesting that this story comes out, because a couple weeks ago I interviewed Rory and Jamie from the Stereo, and
oh wow,
Rory was talking about how when the Impossibles broke up, he and Jamie started the Stereo, and then when he got kicked out of the Stereo, he reinvented the Impossibles. So the Impossibles have now been in part of the conversation for the last couple episodes. So it's interesting that this other thing was happening too around that time. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, dude, there's so many connections. If there's any band that you talk to that is in any way connected to Austin, it's always going to end up coming around to another band. Like, that's what I'm saying. The family tree of bands here it goes back. Like, everybody's played with each other. It's crazy.
I feel like I should do a series, because we just broke. We're in like the hundreds. Just broke 100. Episode 100 a couple episodes back, and this will be like now this new direction where I was trying to find these pockets of things to kind of make like a little mini series of something. So maybe it's like talking about the incestual Austin scene for like a couple episodes. So okay, so this happens and he gets turned away. How was that show? Like, how did it go?
Oh, dude, it was fucking amazing. It was like that at that point for me, that was like top for me. That was right at the beginning of me realizing, like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. There was like a fucking badass crowd. I had just had a major blast being on stage with those dudes. So yeah, I mean, that's really what kind of just set it off for me. And I didn't want to do anything else. I was 17,
Yeah, and that Emos, I remember playing it. It was a weird stage because it felt like it was like shoved in the corner, right? Like it was like it was set up really weird, but Emos was one of those clubs that was on a lot of people's radar, kind of like the Fireside Bowl,
Yeah.
or in New York it would have been, I don't know, I guess like, I mean, New York was like kind of like, the they're more like the bigger clubs like Irving Plaza or Roseland. Roseland was like gigantic, but we would always hear about these places around town, or I'm sorry, around the country, where it was like emos and Fireside Bowl. I can't remember any other ones, but like that place, I almost considered emos, even though it was a club, kind of it resembled a DIY Legion Hall show for some reason, because the crowd there seemed like they were the same crowd that would be at the DIY show in Jersey.
Oh yeah.
So like they would bring it at, you'd be there and they'd have that same energy that they would at a Legion Hall. So it's amazing that that show with them, you got to be at emos and then have that happening. So I could see where you've been like, yeah, I want to keep doing this.
Exactly. I mean, that's emos was definitely the staple in Austin. Like whether you were a small local band or you were a touring band or even like a bigger, like a, a bigger independent label band on the road, like emos was where everybody wanted to play, which is pretty, it's, yeah, I mean, it's a, it's a nostalgic thing for me, but also it's like, it's kind of a bummer at the same time because emos, the name is still around and it's still a venue, but now
It's down the street in East
it's
Austin.
yeah, it's not anything like it used to be. It's like a straight up like music venue, which a lot of bigger bands still play. Like Thrice has played there. A lot of bigger bands still tour through here and play that emos just because that's what they know. But it's not. I don't enjoy the new version of it.
Oh, it's totally different. I mean, I luckily got to play and see the first emos, and the second one I actually saw Bad Religion play there on Easter in 2015. So I was in town, and I'm like, man, I gotta start seeing shows, and they played, and I went there. It's like God damn it, Jay, the bass player, he came out in like a bunny suit, and they played, and it was awesome. But it was this just giant venue. It was not the same. Totally different vibe. And so so you get in the band, and then what was the direction afterwards? Did you guys go on tour right? Or actually no, were they already touring prior to you joining the band?
Yeah, they had already done a couple tours. Well, they might have done one or two tours. I think maybe just one. And apparently that tour just like went to shit. Apparently like they just like everything wrong that could have happened on that tour, like van issues, shit getting stolen or lost. I can't remember all the stories, but I think they'd only gone on tour once or twice before I joined the band. The funny thing is, because you had mentioned that show at the church with Bigwig.
Yeah.
That was the first tour that I went on with them.
Okay, so okay. Now let's talk about that, because the couple things I remember from that. One, like I said previously, you guys showed up, and I don't know if you were actually on the bill, or if like Tom from Bigwig got you guys on that bill, but you played. I don't know if you can remember this, but you guys played like didn't you guys play early? Or,
I
don't.
can't
This is a
remember
very
the order at all.
specific detail. I just remember like, yeah, you guys walked in and went up and just started playing, and I don't think anyone there. I mean, I knew we were all like talking incestual. We weren't like jumping from band to band, but we were all friends with each other, so we'd show up and it'd be like the same crowd. And I just remember people being like, Who the fuck is this band? They're awesome." So, but I didn't know like a lot of people there knew who you were. But once you guys started playing, people just caught that buzz of like, "Who? This is awesome." So,
Yeah.
I know I'm going that, but I do remember we thought of it, you guys, as from that point on, or prior to that, you guys were friends with Bigwig. Like, how did you guys
Yeah.
get connected with them?
So I think Sean was already friends or already knew Tom from Bigwig. So I think that's kind of how we got, because it was a tour. It was an actual like booked tour with them, or at least a group of shows with Bigwig. Basically, on that tour, when we met up with Bigwig, I can't remember exactly like how many days it was that we were on the tour with them, because it was our own tour. We had our own dates outside of the section that we had with Bigwig. But once we met up with them, that's Sean was the only one that we're friends with them. But then we all became friends. Funny enough, At that time, Dynamite Boy was on Off Time Records, which was a label that was based out of El Paso, which, funny enough, at the drive-in was also on before they went to Fearless.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so Off Time was just not working out. I can't remember exactly the reasons, but the band was not happy with Off Time, and this was literally right at the same time that we were on that tour. I don't think there was any kind of contract or anything, so I don't think the band was tied to Off Time, but there was still a relationship there. But it was kind of starting to turn to a point where it wasn't a good one at all. So when we met up with Bigwig and we started playing these shows with them, Tom was like all about us at the time. Like he was
I do remember that.
Yeah, super into the band, was super awesome to us. Like we stayed at his place when we were playing in his town or near his town or whatever the case is. But we crashed at his place. Well, when we stayed at his place, the whole time that after we had initially met up with them and played a couple shows, he was basically every day he'd be like, dude, because Bigwig was on Fearless at that time.
Yeah.
Tom was basically like, dude, I'm gonna call Bob from Fearless. I'm gonna call Bob and I'm gonna make him sign you guys. Like, I'm not gonna get that dude off the phone until he says he's gonna sign you.
I remember hearing this because that was somehow that it got out, and I remember hearing that back then that Tom was literally. I think I remember hearing about that phone call that they were like, yeah, like he likes this band so much that he literally like helped get them on Fearless. Like,
Yep.
Like really was a huge part of that.
Absolutely.
But you guys also could back it though with the music though. Like you guys were good enough, so it wasn't like, oh, this shit band got in there. It was like, oh, these guys are good, and they had someone cheerleading for them to get on the label.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it happened. I mean, so basically, he called. It's hilarious because this was like, who knows what time it was in the morning here. I'm not here, but in Jersey, it was probably like maybe 2 or 3 in the morning because it was like after the show that we had played and we had just gotten to Tom's house, like settling in to like stay the night there. We get to his place and he gets on the phone immediately. Just calls Bob like 2 or 3 in the morning. Jeez. But it wasn't that late in
it's 3 hours
California, yeah. But it was still late enough where like I think he was in bed at that time because he had like kids and stuff. So like he was in bed. So Tom literally woke him up out of bed to basically tell him to that he needs to listen to us. We're gonna send him a CD. He needs to listen to us and he needs to sign us.
Wow. So did you guys hear him on the phone with Bob?
I don't remember hearing him. I just remember him being on the phone. I just distinctly remember him saying something along those lines. But yeah, I remember him being on the phone with Bob.
So what was the next step? Because you guys had just, obviously from Austin to Jersey, that's a long distance. So it wasn't like it was day 2 of your tour. How long into your tour were you when this show happened?
Shit, man. I honestly can't remember how long the whole tour was, like as a whole. But I think it had to have been maybe within the first like 2 weeks or so.
Wow.
Because I think it was probably about a month-long tour, and I know that it was right kind of in the middle of it because that's when we met up with Bigwig because we went up the coast. Like we went over from Texas to Louisiana. We played in Houma, Louisiana, and then I think I can't remember if we went straight over across to Florida and had some shows in. Actually we did. We played in Pensacola, Florida. I remember that, and then that's when we started going up the coast. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was probably about 2 weeks in, I would guess.
How did that tour go? Like, because my last tour that we did, this was like our 8th tour, and we went on for about right over almost 2 months. I think we were on the road, and it was hard because we didn't have any label support, and the shows were like more than were like not that great compared to like the great ones, and that was really straining on us. But so for you, first time just starting that band, you're going on your first tour with them. It's a month long. Do you remember what the vibe was with you guys like at the end?
I don't remember. I don't really remember how the tour ended. If there was anything distinct, like if there was like any like issues, I'd probably remember that. But I just remember us all being like excited about the Fearless thing.
Yeah.
Because it seemed pretty promising. The tour itself was fine. I mean, it was your typical nobody band tour. It was like some shows were awful. Some shows didn't happen. Some shows we'd show up and there would be no show. But
yeah.
for me, because I'm thinking about this from my perspective, and as a 17-year-old, I didn't give a shit. I didn't care how the shows were. I was having fun being on the road with my friends, playing music, meeting new people, being in different places every day. So from what I can remember, it was a fucking blast. And it was exciting to know that we had an opportunity that could take this band to the next level. And I was going to be a part of it. Like, that's what I remember.
Well, just the fact that you guys, so Tom made the call and then Bob said yes. Or did he say, I need to talk to these guys?
He basically said, well, I'll take a listen to the CD and then we can, then we'll have to talk. We'll have a conversation. It wasn't like like he didn't just take Tom's word for it. He's like, there's a process, obviously. He wanted to listen to our stuff. He wanted to talk to the band. And I was never really a part of those conversations because I was a kid. I never really cared to be part of like the business or the talking to labels and stuff. I didn't care about that. That was all Sean. Sean was the oldest in the band. He was the one that was more knowledgeable of that stuff, and he kind of took the lead on it. But
so when we went on our last tour, Tom actually got us connected with, because they were on, Bigwig was on Kung Fu at that time, and because we were from Jersey too, Tom was talking to, Jesus Christ, God damn it, the bass player of the Vandal, Joe Escalante. He was talking to Joe, who owned Kung Fu, and there was kind of talks with us, and I think our drummer Sean was talking to Joe about us potentially getting on Kung Fu. So we go on this tour with this idea that we could potentially be getting on Kung Fu Records. And just the idea of that, when shit was going sour, we would still say, well, there's still that possibility of that happening, which gives you that extra juice along the way, where I'm sure that must have been there with you guys where, for you, you're like, fuck, this is awesome. I'm on tour. I don't give a shit. Like, whatever. This is just amazing. But I'm sure there's that energy of the possibility of you guys getting on Fearless could have easily, and I'm sure you obviously can't 100% remember this, but that could have just been that thing. Well, yeah, but we get on Fearless though. Like that's helping us kind of get through maybe this like little hiccup that's happening right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing is like, the band hadn't really done that many tours, so it's not like there was going to be this. I don't think there was really like a way to compare what the band was doing compared to what it would be if we were with Fearless, because that tour that I did with them was like the first big tour that Dynamite Boy ever did. We did some tours after that, that were kind of smaller tours that, were before we were officially a Fearless band. But like, it definitely got everyone excited to like start writing and, booking more tours. Basically, what ended up happening is, and again, this is my memory, could be totally just barely even a glimpse of what it was, but I remember we booked a tour to the West Coast specifically to go to the Fearless offices.
And that was the one after the one where the one we were just talking about?
I think it was the next tour, the next like big tour where we did like a longer tour rather than just like a weekend or like a few days, regionally or whatever the case is. But yeah, that's kind of what I remember is that I remember we booked a tour that to go west, because the one before was up the East Coast. So we were like, we're doing a West Coast tour now. Went to California to basically meet Bob, go to the Fearless offices. And to be honest with you, this sounds crazy, but I don't even remember. I think it was because it was probably all just a blur for me, because I was so excited to be a part of it that I don't even remember the process. I don't even remember signing anything. I don't even remember that whole visit other than just knowing that we went there.
Do you remember then after getting signed, because the record you guys put out was Finders Keepers on Fearless.
Right.
And then, so what was the process of like from getting signed and then recording that album? Like, what was that like?
So, I mean, as much as I can remember,
Yeah.
I think what we signed for was, I'm trying to remember how many albums we had signed for. I think it was 4.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a
It was
lot.
either 3 or 4. I can't, I may be thinking 4 because I think at one point Bob wanted us to sign for another one, but
Jesus.
yeah, let's just say 3 because that extra one might have just been a potential, but it never happened. But so basically, when we signed for at least 3, I think. But when we went into the studio to record Finders Keepers, it was in LA, and it was we basically planned a tour that would be just like a short stint from Texas to California to basically start recording there. At the time, it still had all the same members from the beginning, which was Andrew, who played guitar, and Scott, who played drums, and me and Sean. So we basically drove out to California. At the time, Andrew, the guitarist, he wasn't able to actually do the drive. He had to fly out there to meet us for the studio time. So Fearless ended up booking studio time for us at, I can't remember the name of the studio, but it was like a pretty big studio, pretty major studio in the LA area. I mean, dude, is it Montel?
Jordan?
Which one is this? Is it Montel Jordan? He's the R&B artist, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
This Is How We Do It.
Yeah.
Like that's been
He
like brought
actually
back to
had
life.
his own
Yeah.
studio in this place.
Okay.
So
Damn.
he booked studio. So Fearless booked studio time for us there for Finders Keepers, and they ended up getting Jim Goodwin, producer, engineer. He did Face to Face, Don't Turn Away.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he did. What else did he do? Shit, I can't remember. He did like a few pretty like influential albums for me, but like pretty well-known bands like albums. So it was super exciting. Like I was super fucking excited because I was like, dude, we're gonna get the dude that did fucking Face to Face. Like this is amazing. So we go in for studio time, and it's just me, Sean, and Scott, our drummer. And I think at that point, Andrew was kind of. I think it was getting to that point where we were starting to kind of realize that he was not really as into it anymore. I don't know if it had to do with family stuff or what, but I mean, it was just one of those things we could just tell that like he wasn't really full into it like we were. So, because the whole situation with him flying out instead of riding with us, while we were in the studio, basically he flew in to do his parts and that was it. He flew in, did his guitar parts, but then eventually, and I can't remember exactly how this happened, was no longer in the band, but while we were in the studio, one distinct memory that I have that was like one of those moments for me that I was like, oh my God, I fucking made it. Like, this is like incredible. Besides the Jim Goodwin part of it.
Yeah. We
were looking for I wanted a really gnarly bass tone. I wanted like a really like, since it was Jim, I was basically like, I want like a Matt Riddle bass tone, like a real fucking gnarly, like gritty sound. And I remember that they got fucking Jim Cherry, bassist for Strung Out, who's no longer alive. He passed away. But Jim Cherry, the original bassist for Strung Out, who was also in Pulley, played guitar in Pulley, they contacted him to basically get him to bring one of his basses and his rig for me to use.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you could imagine how fucking blown away I was because Strung Out was like my favorite. That was like my favorite band, when I started getting into punk rock, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy okay, cool. That's wild,
yeah,
man.
That was probably like the highlight of my teenage years of that experience. Not only that, but when Jim Cherry came in, funny story about this, little side story.
Yeah.
So while we're in the studio, I'm in there just like basically playing. I can't remember what bass. I think I had my own bass. No, sorry. It was Jim's bass. He had already come in. He brought the bass, the guitar, got it all set up, whatever. And I'm just sitting there like trying to keep my cool, like trying not to lose my shit, be total fanboy. So I'm just sitting there waiting for him to set everything up. Well, he's like, go out there, fiddle around with it so we can get some tones. We can kind of dial it in. So before I went in there to play, Sean's like, because I used to do this thing where I would like play strung out bass lines all the time, just for fun, and these are like staple bass lines that like everybody knows. If you're a fan of strung out, these bass lines are like, what you distinctly know what song that is.
Yeah.
So Sean had this idea. He was like, dude, he's like, you should, like, when you start playing his bass while he's in like the boardroom, the main room, getting sounds, you should fucking play a strung out song on bass. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not doing that. That's fucking lame. I'm not going to do it. No. He's like, dude, just do it. Just see what he does. Just do it. So I'm like, fine. And I felt so fucking embarrassed, dude. I felt so stupid. Went in there, started playing the bass line. I'm trying to remember what song it is. It was off of Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. I think it's the first track off of Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. It's literally the bass. So I start playing that bass line. And I'm looking through the glass into the main room where the board is, where he is, and he's sitting in front of the board. And all of a sudden, I see Jim Cherry's head poke up and look out the window at me, and he just smiles. And he gets on the intercom thing, and he's like, "You play that better than I do."
Wow.
I fucking lost my shit, dude. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe where I was. I was amazed.
See, that's wild. Jim's come up a lot in a lot of interviews. He actually, one reason I interviewed Wendy Cherry, his wife.
Oh wow.
She gave the whole story about him, and it was really amazing. And then I had Jake from Strung Out on recently, so like Jim has come up plenty. It's like Whippersnapper. I talked to them and talked to him. So it's funny. He just was weaving in and out of these interviews, but it's. There's been many people said that, like, he was just like very intimidating guy because he was this big motherfucker, and he was also like, just once you got to know him, then you were like, oh, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine, like, Matt Riddle was my hero back in the day. Like when I started playing bass for my band, I played with my fingers to start because Matt Riddle played with his fingers, and I just like, so if Matt Riddle came in the room at that time, because I didn't really know anything really about Jim Cherry until I started doing, from talking to Wendy Cherry and until now. But back then, like if I can know what it must have felt like if, like, let's say Matt Riddle came in, it's like, you're gonna use my rig, like I would have been fucking floored. So I can completely understand you having that same thing with Jim Cherry, and then him looking at me like and saying that, I would be like, I could die. Like this is fantastic.
That's literally how I felt. My life was made at that point. That's why I said at that point I was like, I fucking made it. I made it.
That's so fucking awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing, dude.
Actually, and just in a sad note, like this was right around the time though, right around when he passed too. Like, wasn't that soon after? Because you guys have put out, and I don't really want to like stay on that, but like, I'm just trying to connect the dots and timeline. But you guys put that record out in '99. That's when it came out. I think he was pretty soon after where he had passed away.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I don't think it was like within a year or something, like, because I think if it was within a year, I probably would have been pretty like upset. I think it may have been maybe it was a couple years after.
Okay. Because I just imagine from that experience and then hearing that later on, you must have been like, "Whoa, that's crazy."
I was pretty bummed out, dude.
Yeah.
But I was also thankful at the same time because, I was like, I got a chance to fucking meet him and hang out with him, and I can attest to that too with him being an intimidating guy because he's just like this big fucking, long hair, and he's not only intimidating by the way he looks, but the way he talks too, because, he just seemed grumpy. He just seemed like he just didn't want to be there.
Oh, that's funny.
But that wasn't the case at all. That was just his personality. Once you got to know him, he was like a super fucking cool guy. Like super cool.
Oh, that's so wild. Actually, and just super real quick, there's like kind of go back just to add to what you said before about Jim Goodwin. I just like brought up a list of albums. I don't. So it says like he did Voodoo Glow Skulls, Schlep Rock, Straight Face, Rhythm Collision. So these are like some of the bands, just to kind of give people an idea of who he produced. Ignite, but it doesn't say that he did Don't Turn Away. It said that he did the Face to Face self-titled release on A&M.
Really?
Yeah, so it's not on there. I mean,
Weird.
yeah, but that says it. But there also could be he could have had some other part in it. Maybe he mixed it or
Maybe.
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah.
Because
So
that's the
I
one
don't
thing
know.
I distinctly remember about, because I didn't know anything about Jim Goodwin, when they said that that's who was going to be producing and engineering our album. But I remember some basically being told like he he did Face to Face, Don't Turn Away.
Yeah, it
And
must be
that's
somewhere on
when I
there.
was like, oh shit, this dude is like a big deal.
Well, it's interesting too because he did Bigwig Stay Asleep right
Yeah.
around the same time as you guys. Do you know if that was before or after you guys did Finders Keepers?
I think it was after. I think Stay Asleep came out after Finders Keepers did.
Okay,
Mm,
because it has
I'm trying,
yeah,
I'm
has it
trying to
like
remember
before you?
when Big Wig left Fearless, because obviously it would have been before that, and I can't remember if Big Wig left Fearless shortly after Finders Keepers was out. I can't remember.
So what was it like being so you guys record Finders Keepers and then you get the record in your hands and you're touring. And how you doing on time, by the way? We've been on for like an hour. You good
Yeah,
or
no, I'm good.
okay?
I'm good.
So you guys are so now you recorded the album, you're on Fearless, you're out on tour. Did you see a difference then in shows and then tours?
We did see a little bit of a difference, but I think what helped that is that they put us on tours with some bigger bands so that we could start being exposed to more people and build a fan base from that. Because like, after we signed to Fearless, after we released Finders Keepers, we got tours with like, so I just remembered, because we were talking about Jim Cherry, we actually did a short like 3 or 4 day stint with Pulley, No Use for Name, and fuck, I can't remember the band. It's like more of a punk rock band. But anyway, we did a few shows with them. That was like one of the first like big, quote unquote tours that we had. Even though it was only 3 or 4 days in the middle of our own tour. But dude, they were putting us on tours with like, or at least dates with like MXPX, and you know, we had a few dates on Warp Tour as well at that time. What, like probably the only one Warp Tour that Green Day ever did in Lake Havasu.
Yeah.
It was, well, it's either Lake Havasu or Lake Tahoe. Okay, one of those lake places.
There was a lake
Um,
involved.
yeah, we had like a 3 day. Well, actually, no. At that time, it was only one show. We played that one show at Lake Havasu or Lake Tahoe or whatever, and it was with Green Day. So like that's basically what Fearless started doing for us, is giving us the ability to play with bigger bands. So we were exposed to bigger crowds to start building our own fan base from that. Um, so that's kind of where we started getting more of our name out there and having Finders Keepers being circulated. And then after that, when we started touring on our own, yeah, we could definitely see a difference. We had actual fans at our shows that knew our songs. Yeah, and then from there, we'll talk about it in a minute. But basically, I just remember there being a point where it was like, okay, where do we go from here? You know?
Okay. Well, let me just real quick. So let me make a note of that. Where do we go from here? Um, when you guys are on the tour though, you're playing with Pulley and No Use for a Name. Like, what were those guys like behind the scenes? Like, what was it like hanging out with them and playing shows with them?
Dude, it's phenomenal. Like it again. I mean, if you think about how I got introduced to the scene and the band that I listened to, Pulley was one of them, because I mean, I remember having compilations of all these like fat bands, but I just remember them being like super welcoming, super cool. That we for some reason we always got put on tours with bands that we were not really anything alike. But I think it was good. I would think it was good for us because it helped us stand out, because we didn't have that same sound a lot of the time.
Well, you guys had like kind of I mean, I was going back on some of the songs. Like, you guys had like almost to me, It had like an Atari's mix with like a little in fucking Sean's voice, a little bit of a Tom Petty-ness to it. But I heard a lot of Ataris.
Yeah,
So
which is weird because,
I feel like you guys would have mixed perfectly in those tours.
well, I mean, well, some of them, yeah, because we would play with bands like the Ataris, because we played with them too. We played with MXPX. It was definitely for those bands specific, but we were put on a lot of tours with, like, when we did a tour with fucking Strung Out and Straight Faced, like.
So they were a bit more harder edge, I guess.
Yeah, so like a lot of the bands we went on tour with were more like faster, technical, like punk rock stuff, like Pulley, and so. And it's funny that you say that there was like, it seems like there's a hint of Ataris in our sound, which I would agree with. I mean, like it was definitely the same, same kind of like edgy kind of pop punk style. But Sean wasn't, he wasn't like an Atari's fan. Sean was funny because, at the beginning he did write a lot of the music. He wrote a lot of the stuff, but like a lot of his influences were like, Green Day was a big influence for him, but a lot of his influences, he grew up around like straight up, like old school country. Like he grew up around country. His family's from Buckeye, Arizona. So like,
okay,
he grew up around country music and obviously punk rock, but like his influences definitely, to me, other than Green Day, his influences didn't really come out in our music, funnily enough. But I think, once I joined the band and I had my own influences, my own input or whatever, there was definitely elements in there of different things, because I was influenced by the Ataris. I listened to the Ataris for a while. I was also influenced. I had more of that metal edge that you could kind of hear in a lot of the band's music, because Sean loved metal too, but I don't think before I joined the band, I think I kind of gave him a reason for us to write more stuff that had like sometimes little riffs here and there that were like metal influenced. But so I guess in that sense, we were somewhat like those other bands we were touring with, but I've always felt like the black sheep of the tour a lot of the time, because we were just a straight pop punk band, like an edgy pop punk band.
One thing I just thought of is when I would go to see bands play, like when we'd go Irving Plaza, and like as I mentioned before, Irving Plaza and Roseland were these big ass clubs in New York City. So when we would go see bands that were bigger bands, we'd go in the city and watch them, and it was a different experience because it was such a big venue. You felt almost disconnected from the crowd, but then you'd get connected when you'd all be running to the front and throwing your fingers up and like screaming the lyrics back to them. But there would be, so if I saw a face-to-face play, that would be like, these guys are untouchable. But then there would be these opening bands that you'd miss, or they'd catch your attention. Like I saw face-to-face when they played Irving Plaza, and then Suicide Machines were one of the opening bands, and I had no idea who they were, but I was like, holy fuck, who's this band? And then they blew up. So, and then I was thinking, like, how cool is this? Like, they're all backstage. They're like fucking hanging out, and they're touring together, and they're like hanging out in the bus or like in the vans and shit like that. Like, I'm not gonna hang out too long, but when you were on these tours, these guys were like, you hanging out with them afterwards, like Tony Sly and stuff, and you guys are going to like Denny's and shit afterwards and being like, this is fucking wild. This is like,
oh yeah,
they're hanging out with these guys like outside of the club.
Yeah, some tours for sure. Some bands just, after so long, they don't. I think bands just don't really try that hard to become friends with the band they're on tour with. Just because like it's just it has to come natural. But definitely a lot of the time when we were on tours, I think it was just our personalities helped us become friends with people, especially with like Sean. Really just the personality dynamic in our band, I think, made it easier for us to become friends with bands we're on tour with. Like that tour with that little short few days with like Pulley, and that was a little bit different because like it was so short. We didn't really have time to become friends with them, or to like hang out with them. We would have conversations with them at the venue. We'd talk to them, hang out and stuff, but like we never really actually became friends with them. I think when we were starting to get longer tours with bands, like that Strung Out tour, like we became really good friends with those dudes. And that Strung Out tour was with Whippersnapper, Straight Faced, and Strung Out. And that was an East Coast tour. We became really good friends with those dudes on that tour. Like I still occasionally talk to, I'm blanking right now. Chris Aiken.
Okay.
I just
Oh, Chris. Yeah.
yeah, totally blanked.
Yeah. Actually, right. I've been following him on Instagram through this whole thing because he just sits there and just like shreds on guitar on Instagram. If you get a chance
Yeah,
to watch, it's amazing. All right.
yeah, he's fucking phenomenal. He's really fucking talented musician. Yeah, like I still occasionally talk to him. Like he came through. Strung Out came through Austin sometime recently. Well, I guess not recently, like years ago, but way after. Obviously, we were touring and we were even a band. But I'd reached out to him because they were apparently going to be in Austin because him and I share the same birthday. So like, that's kind of always the connection we had, is like fucking birthday brothers, So when I found out they were coming through and they were playing on both of our birthdays, I came and fucking hung out or whatever. But so like, there's definitely bands that we became friends with, like Strung Out, Whippersnapper, especially. Fucking love those dudes. And I miss those guys so much. I think it just depended on the length of the tour. If it was just like a few dates with somebody, we were never able to really create that friendship and like have it be more of a long-term thing rather than just for that tour.
Yeah, actually, if you get a chance, I interviewed Andy from Whippersnapper recently, and it's really fucking funny. I don't know if you were like a big podcast listener.
I saw it. I hadn't listened to it yet. I listened to the one with John from Beefcake.
Oh, that was a great one.
Yeah, John is fucking hilarious, dude.
Yeah, it was funny because when we were done talking, he's like, "All right, here's like all the real scoop." I was like, "Holy shit, man!"
Yeah, those guys are fucking crazy.
Yeah, he was like, "Here's some stories I couldn't tell." I was like, "Go on."
Yeah.
So that you guys start touring more. You're like you're on Fearless, and then because this is like around like 99. This is right before that hump where it goes into the early 2000s and everything shifts, which is why I've said pretty much on almost every single episode is that's around the time where I disconnected from the scene and started to get jaded because it turned. I mean, I don't think that style of music that we had could literally have lasted another decade because there's a point where it was so much repetition going on that it needed something new to come in. But that's where the scene that I remember that was so tight was the late 90s into the early 2000s. And after that, it just kind of became a fashion show. But you guys transition. I've had a couple interviews where bands stuck with that through that time. So you guys are starting off, and you're starting off with a bang, and then you're on Fearless. You put out the record. You're getting these big tours. Then you guys are going out, and then you had mentioned that where do we go? What do we do from here? So do we want to talk about that now, or do we want to talk a little bit about how those years were going before you got to that point of asking that question?
No, I think it makes sense to talk about like why I even made that statement and how it kind of got into that, because we had, when we went into the studio to release our second Fearless album, which was Somewhere in America. I think at that point we'd been touring and stuff. We'd been, doing pretty okay. I don't remember numbers or anything like how well Finders Keepers did. If we had recouped, all the money that was spent on the recording, like on any of that stuff. But like, we were still, Fearless was still getting us on good tours and stuff. We went into the studio to record Somewhere in America, and personally, Somewhere in America, I feel like that album was, and definitely, I want to say this, Cameron Webb was who produced and engineered that album. He's done like Danzig. He's done he's done quite a few big name people and bands and stuff. But so he's a great producer and engineer, but for whatever reason, like that album for me personally didn't turn out how I would have wanted it, because the songs on that album were, I feel like that took Dynamite Boy to another level, because Finders Keepers was very almost like commercial. It was just super polished, super pop. I think Somewhere in America, when we put that out, it kind of made it to where we kind of went back to like just being like a raw, edgy, like pop punk band. And that album, I was able to actually help with a lot of the writing, because that was when I was fully in the band. Finders Keepers, a lot of those songs were already written before I joined the band. There's even a couple songs that were re-recorded that were on Hell is Other People that ended up on Finders Keepers too. Somewhere in America was kind of like the first time that we had put out an album that was literally a mesh of everyone's influences in the band. So I had a lot of input in the writing on that one. I even have a song on Somewhere in America that I sing called AB99. So basically at that point for the band, I think it was like we were starting to kind of realize that, okay, we know what we want our sound to be like. We know that we want this to go in this direction, and we definitely want this to take it up to the next notch. But like, it just seemed like we weren't really getting any much more than we were already getting after Finders Keepers. It seemed like the hype of our band was kind of like declining, not just with like fans or just a fan base, but like the label. With Fearless, it just seemed like they weren't really as into it. Of course they were into it because they were still doing what they do for us, getting us in the studio, getting us on tours. But like, it just seemed like at that point for me, it was like a plateau. There was just not much happening other than what we were already experiencing. We weren't getting up to that next level. Well, to kind of make a long story short, I could go on and on about the different tours that we did. I don't really want to do that, but like, we kind of ended up feeling like we just kind of lost that attention, and there wasn't really a lot being put into getting us to a point where we could get bigger and have a bigger fan base, go on our own a headlining tour, and not have to worry about, fuck, is there going to be anyone at this show? Well, basically, eventually the relationship with Fearless ended up kind of being damaged, because I remember that Bob from Fearless, pretty much, we had visited the office, and Bob from Fearless pretty much brought us into a room to basically tell us, and these are not in his words, this is me just remembering what I remember from that. Basically that if we want to get bigger, if we want to start appealing to, more of the pop punk scene and the younger crowd, because that's what our music was. It was more appealing to like the younger, like the teenagers and the young, like 20-year-olds. He's basically told Sean that he would have to lose weight, that our image was going to hold us back, was basically what he told us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it really kind of like hurt. I mean, it hurt Sean, it made him feel bad. It made him feel like he was the primary example of the band. He's the lead singer, he's the primary writer of the band. And he was made to feel like his image, the way he looks, is holding the band back.
It's funny that you said that, because I interviewed Jeremy Hernandez. He was in, you know him from Near Miss because you guys toured with him. And he was in Humble and Bigwig and all that. And I think I remember in his interview that I think he had the same kind of conversation with Bob. And again, I'm not putting this out there to, when I bring up stories like this, like, I think sometimes I've gotten people to be like, wow, like, you're kind of shitting. I'm like, I'm not shitting on people. I'm just repeating things that were said. And I'm just saying, like, that's interesting that was a conversation that you guys had, because I was like, oh, I know that did happen. And I think it was, I believe it was when Jeremy was on, I think when Near Miss was on the label as well. And they were like, you guys got to start writing songs that keep up with the trends. So I guess that must have been something that was going on. And again, from an outside perspective, I can see where, and I'm not trying to be Switzerland here, because no one wants to be told like, hey, you got to lose weight to like stay as a fucking band. But like, I can see from a band perspective, you're like, well, that sucks. And I could also see at that time where a label is probably freaking out because shit is shifting, and then streaming is downloading's happening, and money is just like tanking, where they're like, fuck, we got to figure out how to stay afloat. Yeah, there's
definitely two sides to it. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I'm not doing this to associate. I'm just like, from an outside perspective, it makes sense around that time, because I think around that time everyone was kind of freaking out. But so how did you guys take that from that meeting going forward?
Like I said, I think it kind of damaged the relationship. I think it was more of, instead of us fully understanding what he meant by that, I think it was more that we took offense rather than understood the reason why.
Well, I don't think you're going to. I don't think anyone from 20 years away, you can look at it from a lens and sit with it. But from in the moment, if someone told me any of that, and you're like, Jesus.
Yeah. And at that time, I was still pretty young too, so like, the funny thing is I was the young one in the band. I was the one that was more fitted to the image that Bob was saying we needed to be, because I was the right age for that, So like, I didn't feel personally attacked, or I didn't feel offended for myself. I felt bad for Sean, and I stood up for him, because I was like, for me, it doesn't matter what a band looks like. If their music kicks ass, I don't give a fuck if the singer's fucking 500 pounds. I don't give a shit about that, So, but at the same time, in hindsight, I realize now, like, okay, as a label, as a business, it makes sense why, because that at that time things were shifting. Like, I even remember Bob trying to basically tell us, I think it was a separate conversation. Maybe it was the same one. What's the band called? There was a band that's huge now. What's the band that has the Delilah song?
Oh, I was going to say Plain White Tees.
Plain White Tees. This was before Plain White Tees was big or really that known. He had gotten a copy of one of their recordings. And at this time, Plain White Tees sounded like, they just basically sounded like fucking Jimmy Eat World. They sounded like just a straight up kind of Jimmy Eat World, like pop rock / punk band. And I remember him playing it, basically being like, almost like basically just trying to be like, oh man, check these guys out. These guys are awesome. These are guys I'm thinking about signing, blah, 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 blah. But it turns out he was trying to show us, like, this is what the sound is now. This is what you guys should be doing.
Yeah.
More trying to go more of that mainstream sound. So really just, that's kind of what damaged that relationship and made us kind of push back and not just basically kind of do our own thing. And that just kind of killed it right there for Fearless. They kind of just didn't really want to put more into us, because we were just going to do the same thing we've been doing. And I mean, even then we still got some really good tours. We did almost an entire Warped Tour, as well as, like, we got a tour with Fall Out Boy and Mest and Matchbook Romance. Like, that was probably one of the bigger tours that we had gotten.
Jesus.
Yeah. That tour was fucking badass, man. It's funny because we're literally being put on tours with bands that are kind of this new generation of the scene, because it's like a mix between pop punk and like emo.
Yeah.
That's kind of where that shift happened, where it's like you started having these emo bands and like pop, like / pop punk / like hardcore, like, mix of styles. These bands come out like The Used and shit like that. I think that's kind of when we realized that we were even more of a black sheep now, because we were still the same band that we were, and we're getting put on these tours.
Well, that's got to feel so weird, because it's almost like you're getting pushed out. Like, you're welcomed in with open arms and people are really digging your stuff. You're getting on a label that's supporting you. They're like, yeah, we're going to give you, 4 to 5 record deal, whatever it was. And so you're like, wow, like, we're really being accepted. And I can imagine being in a band, because we broke up in 2001, right in the beginning of 2001, before like 9/11. So we missed that whole thing. So for you guys to stick with that, I can just imagine feeling squeezed out on not every tour, but just slowly seeing yourself where the fans are just starting to shift and these bands are showing up and you're like, what is this fucking circus that's on stage right now that sounds so different, and the crowd is just not receptive. I mean, that's my viewpoint. I don't know if that's actually how it felt, but
it is. That's exactly what it was like, because we were still unique because we had somewhat of the same sound we've always had, even if it had evolved a little bit. But like, yeah, I mean, the crowd was different. The bands were different. Like I felt like we just didn't seem to really fit in on a lot of tours or a lot of shows with bands that were big at the time. I think it was hard for people to, it was, from the crowd side, from the listener side, I think it was hard for people to get into our sound because we weren't what the new sound was. Like they weren't used to that. These kids didn't really grow up listening to like pop punk, like older pop punk bands and stuff. So it definitely made it a little more disheartening.
Yeah.
And that's probably that ultimately is what led, our singer Sean getting to a point where he just didn't see the point anymore.
It's funny, really, just in going back even further, like when the sound that we were used to started taking over, I bet that the straight up punk bands that were like Ramones style, or there was a band, what the fuck were they called? The Vapids. They were this band we played when we first started playing, and there was like the 3-piece. They just straight up punk. It was just straightforward. There was really you couldn't really tell the difference in the songs because it almost sounded like the same thing all the time. Yeah, and it's like, but for that scene, that's what those guys grew up in a scene, and all of a sudden our style took over and kind of expanded on the punk thing and made it more digestible and bigger with more guitars and choruses and things like that. I bet that's when they were felt pushed out. And then it almost was, I mean, that's just the way it goes. Then we do our thing. We're like, we're going to do this forever. And then all of a sudden it shifts and we're getting pushed out. And we're like, shit. Like, what I guess this happened to us now too. And then because when that sound happened in the early 2000s, I mean, it went in every direction. And it was more emo, but like you said, Thrice became like this whole, like they kind of created their own bubble, and then like Brand New was their own bubble, and Taking Back Sunday was their own thing, and then there was these other, like I've said before, like that disco punk shit that was going on. And so then you're like, where the fuck do we belong in all this?
Exactly.
Like you said,
we didn't fit into any of that. Which is funny because I was that age where like I was able to kind of grow with the different styles, and I was into all the different styles that we ended up, kind of being put with. Like I was a huge fan of Thrice, so I was into those styles of music. So I was still kind of content with just being in a band and being exposed to that and getting to know those bands and going on tour with them and stuff. But I think, I was just too young to really care that much about how different we were. Yeah, I think ultimately, like I said, that was kind of just to our demise. Our singer just didn't want to do it anymore. He got to a point where he, because he was married that last few years, and he wanted to have a kid. He wanted a family. He kind of just wanted to like buckle down. Because I mean, he had been doing it. Like he'd been doing it, before I even joined for a while. I mean, not touring, but at least playing in bands locally and stuff. And like, he, like I said, he was a lot older than I was. And I think that's just I think it just got to a point like I'm trying to remember exactly how it happened, but when we put out the self-titled, the last album that we released, the last Fearless album that we put out, which personally I feel is like our strongest album because it's literally just it was an evolution of the band, but it was kind of like a good send off. Production wise, probably the best thing we'd ever done. And the funny thing is me personally, that album was our best work, and we chose who produced and engineered it. It wasn't like, here, you guys are going to go in the studio with this guy. We chose who we were doing it with. We did it locally. We did it at home with this guy. Like, I think that was kind of like our final, just like, we're going to put everything into this. This is who we are. It was a good mix of like everything that we've ever done, plus an evolution of the band. And yeah, I think that's just when, I can't remember if Sean, I think it was before we put that out. I think Sean basically was just, he made the announcement to us. Like we had gotten back from a tour, I think. And I'm trying to remember what tour it is. I think it might have been actually that I think it was either the Warped Tour that we did, or I really can't remember, man. But basically we had gotten home from a tour, and we had already had the studio time set up, or we were already talking about it at least. And that was when we had the band meeting, and Sean basically was like, I'm done. The band's not going anywhere. We're not doing it. We're just doing the same thing. We're not getting any bigger. So I'm ready to just buckle down. I want to have a kid. I want to start a family. Blah 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 blah. So I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go yet.
I was gonna ask you that. Yeah, I was gonna be like, what was your mental state like when that all went down?
I was pretty bummed, man. I mean, I was probably pretty devastated, to be honest. Just going back and remembering, because, dude, that's all I've been. I mean, I can't remember how old I was, but I think just because that's all I'd known since I was 17 was just being on the road, being in a band,
Yeah.
And that's all I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. I thought I was going to be in a successful band and make it. So it was pretty devastating for me to know that, like, well, shit, now I either have to do something else or start all over.
So I have a theory about that. So about 6 years ago, I was married. I was dating someone for about 3.5 years, and I was married for 2.5 years. And so about 6 years total, we were together, and it was my life. And I was like, then we, like I said, we were married for the last part of it. And one day, out of nowhere, she was like, "Hey, I'm out." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And it just like, it ended right away. And it really crushed the fuck out of me. And later on, I kind of made a theory about it, that, and just to kind of compare, where it's like, this is, being in a band, it's definitely like a marriage, but it's also when you have an idea in your head that you're going a certain direction, I think your brain kind of carves out a this is kind of a big way, like some kind of like, it establishes what your life looks like for you, right? So it kind of draws this line ahead, and it's like, this is going to be here, here, and here. And so your brain just gets used to saying, like, this is what my life's going to be. And then when that gets disrupted and you're like, this isn't going to happen anymore, I think your brain kind of like overloads or cracks, because it's like, I can't compute right now. What do you mean that thing that I said I was told myself every single second of the day or whatever it's going to be, like, stops? I think that causes people to just have that effect where they're like, wait, this is my life. What do you mean I can't? This isn't going to fucking happen anymore.
Yeah.
So because you're just drawing that picture, and all your thoughts and the time that you're spending alone, like, you're thinking of this future you're going to. We're going to play this show. Maybe we're going to write an album like this, and this is where we're going to be. And then it stops, and your brain's like, and then you realize that you actually can't have that happen because that other person has to be a part of it, and it becomes real. And that's when you're like, overload.
Yeah.
Fuck.
No, totally, dude.
Yeah.
I can definitely, I can see that, just thinking back on how I felt in that moment, knowing like, fuck, this is it. Like, I can't keep doing this. It's not like I can do this without him. He's the fucking, I mean, he was the original, he's the one who started, he's the one that got me to this point. I think thinking back now, I wouldn't trade any of those experiences for anything, because like being in that band and having all those experiences helped me grow as a person. It helped my musical influence and writing, and even just now that I'm in, I'm almost 40, it's still to this day, it's like one of those things that I can always go back to certain things that I learned and apply them to today.
Yeah.
And still have relationships with people that we were around and were touring with or whatever, that I still have those relationships. Like, I'll give you an example. Still have a really great relationship with Tom. Like, I've had ever since Dynamite Boy broke up, I started like a couple other bands, in between the end of Dynamite Boy and now. Like, I've started like a very like kind of more melodic hardcore band, punk band that was like very propaganda style. Like, I've done all kinds of shit since then. But like, I've recently, Bigwig came through town with the punk rock band that I had that's no longer around, but he came through town and we fucking set up a show and we played with Bigwig. Like,
sick.
Yeah. So like, it's cool that like I had those years to like get to know people that can still be a part of my life now as an adult, where that's not my focus anymore. I'm married, I've got kids, like I've got a real job, it's still a part of my past. That's still part of who I am, that like I'll always be able to go back to and have like super fond memories of that time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem lies when people really hold on to that and it keeps them from moving on, where it's like, man, you missed all these things you could have done since then, you
Yeah.
know? And then like, and that's where it's more damaging. But if it's like you can see it from a positive look, like yeah, like sometimes it can be like you can always think of the what if, but if that's where you live and you only really had that part of your life for like a small amount of time. I mean, literally for you, it was 5 years, kind of like, right? Let's see, like 99 to
I think it was like
2004,
seven,
7 years,
seven to
yeah.
eight.
So it's like
Yeah.
almost a good decade. But since then, I mean, it's been, well, it's 15 years since you guys broke up, and you guys did play. I saw you guys played a reunion show in 2008.
Oh, we did a few.
Yeah. So like when you guys did that, and then I'm gonna wrap this up. But like, what was it like for you guys to get together and play those, and what was the response?
It was amazing, dude. Like the funny thing is, we were talking about the new emos earlier. That was our first reunion that we did. Was our first like real reunion. We had like Cruiserweight and Riddlin Kids and a couple other local well-known bands. We played that fucking huge stage, and that place was fucking packed, dude.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures on your Instagram, or I'm
It
sorry,
was
on your Facebook,
amazing.
and you're crowd surfing in one of them. Like you
Yeah.
jumped into the crowd, I guess.
Well, that I think that might have been a different
Oh, that was
reunion
2000. That
show.
was 2012. It
Yeah,
said.
because I think that
Okay.
one was at Emos.
Yeah. That. Yeah. That. Okay. All right. But
Yeah,
then.
the old Emos. Because I think we had done.
Oh.
Man, was that? I can't
No,
remember if that
the
picture
one
was a
in
reunion.
I'm literally on the Dynamite Boy page and it says 2012, and it has emo sign behind it. This is the big one though. This is like the
Oh,
big.
okay.
So you could see the crowd is just there's just like the place is packed.
Yeah,
But that's also 4 years after the 2008 one show.
yeah. So the funny thing is out of the few reunion shows we had, the final one that we had, which at the time we didn't really say was the final one, we didn't know it was either, was at a newer, not newer, but it's out of all the ones you probably know, was at Mohawk.
Mohawk. I
It's
do not
on
know that.
like Red River. Yeah, so it's like I said, it's a newer venue that is probably more known to people locally, but they have like an inside and outside. It's honestly, it's kind of like a new emos downtown. It's kind of like the alternative music scene. It's where a lot of like the local like punk or metal bands play. But the last reunion show we played, and not to sound like super like bummer or anything, but it was pretty. It was a pretty small crowd, dude.
Oh, really?
The last one that we did, and we did it with Cruiserweight again. And I think that was when I realized, I was kind of like, all right, I think the reunion shows are done. Like, we're
Yeah.
not. Everybody's moved on. It's time for us to move on. And I was cool with it. I'm like, I've got my own life, got my own music that I'm working on myself as a hobby, just to keep it in my life. But like, that's when that last show we did was when I realized, like, okay, people don't care anymore. People have other things that they're other bands and music they're focused on now. So
Well, how often were the reunion? You said you did a bunch of them. So 2008, you guys did a few, but then also in 2012. So how many reunion shows do you think you guys played from 2008, 12, and then what year was the last one you did that said like it wasn't that big of a crowd?
oh man, I feel like we did 3 reunions, because I know one was at the new emos location, and then I know another one was at Red 7 when it was still around. And then the last one at Mohawk. I don't remember any other shows than those 3. I could be missing one, but I think we did 3 reunion shows.
Well, at the same time though, it's like the first one. It's like when I don't know. Like, do you remember? Did you ever listen to Lifetime back in the day?
I didn't know.
Okay, they broke up before everyone really got to know who they were, and this is like when Jersey's Best Dancers came out in like 97, 98, I forget, 97. And they played a reunion show in 2005. I mean, they played 3 of them because they had so many people that wanted to go, and people like fucking packed these clubs, and then they got back together and they made an album and they kept playing. So it's like the novelty of what you think is over is you're right, you see it, and we were like, okay, like I saw it. The closer they are, the more it's going to start kind of fading. But then you have like more time that goes by, and then you can kind of pull it off again. Because then
Yeah.
people are like excited about it. But if the closer, if they're too close, people are like, well, I just saw them like recently.
Yeah.
You know, so they're like, I got shit to do.
Well, that's the thing. I think we did try to space them out for that reason.
Yeah.
And we never wanted to leave people the impression of like, there's going to be another one. We always just like, we just do this together last minute because we wanted to just play a show. Right. I'm trying to think of, I had a thought about that and I just lost it, but it was basically, it had to do with the last reunion show that we did. Sean lives in Seattle now, by the way. He's been living there now for the last 5-6 years, maybe even longer than that. But I know that he was living in Seattle for our last reunion that we did because he came into town to do the reunion. And that was at Mohawk. That was the one that was like there wasn't a lot of people there. Yeah, I think it's now it's just again we've all moved on. They're just memories now. We still have our Dynamite Boy Facebook page up, which by the way, to kind of close this out, I'll give you a pretty crazy incident that happened recently with Dynamite Boy.
Yeah.
Has to do with a crazy, I guess, fan.
Go on.
Yeah. So basically, and this has been going on for a few years. So this guy had messaged our Facebook page and I think he was actually talking to Sean at the time. This guy basically was asking for us to sign something for him and his daughters, but he made it more like, my daughters love your band. They're like kids. My daughters sing your songs all the time. He was like sending pictures of his daughters with them listening to. It was just, it seemed innocent and cute and sweet at the beginning. Well, this was around the time where we stopped communicating with each other. Like we didn't really have much of a relationship, at least, Sean and the rest of the band, because the rest of the guys like Sam, our drummer, Dusty, our guitarist, like we're all bro. Like we all ended up being in bands together after Dynamite Boy. Like they were actually part of those bands that I was in. But, when Sean kind of was out of the picture at that point, he just kind of moved on. None of us were really talking to this guy. Sean was talking to him. So eventually Sean just got off Facebook. He no longer had a Facebook account. He just left Facebook and just kind of fell off the face of the earth for a little while. So this guy continued to message our band Facebook page, was like just very adamant that we send him something signed for his daughters. And none of us were actively managing the page or actively watching the page. So occasionally I'd go and like see that we'd have like messages in our inbox and I'd see them and, I would respond back to some of them. Well, eventually I responded back to this guy and I'm like, hey man, thank you so much, for being a fan. And that's great that you guys, love our music. As you know, we haven't been a band in years. We're no longer actively watching this page. None of us have anything that we can sign or give to you. So we appreciate that you love us, but, and we also appreciate the support, but, we're just not, that's just not something we can do. Right. And it was totally innocent. It wasn't like saying like, oh, we don't want to fucking send you shit. It was more like, hey man, we don't have anything we can sign for you. We appreciate the love, but we've all moved on. This band is no longer active, period. Well, occasionally over the years, he's kept sending us messages, and it's gotten to the point where it's gotten like a little uncomfortable, and where he's almost like trying to give us updates about his daughter. Like, she's listening to Dynamite Boy again today, and blah 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 blah. She's at her school and showing her friend. Like, it started getting weird, So finally, I had to set up an auto response on our band page, basically just to say, thank you for messaging us. We're no longer an active band and no one is actively monitoring this page. We appreciate the support, but we will not be personally responding to any messages, basically to try to like stop him from wanting to keep sending us messages. Well, then he starts seeking out our personal profiles and fucking sending us messages.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He sent me a message a while back and I ignored it. I blocked the guy. I was like, I don't even want to fucking talk to this dude. He's fucking weird. So, but I didn't talk to anybody else. I didn't ask Sam or Dusty. I didn't ask him like, hey, is this guy messaging you guys? I just kind of was like, whatever, I'll block him, just ignore him. Well, I don't know if you know, one of the tours we did was with Lost City Angels, Further Seems Forever, and Breaking Pangea.
Okay, I saw that flyer on
your
page.
Well, we became really good friends with Jason Gleason, who was the singer for Further Seems Forever after Chris Carrabba. That's who was the singer on the tour that we did with them. Well, out of nowhere the other day, I mean, this is how much this guy has been fucking like harassing us at this point. I get a message from Jason, and I hadn't talked to that dude in years. I mean, probably I haven't even talked to him since we did the tour with them. He sends me a message, he copy and paste this fucking message from this guy addressed to Dynamite Boy. This dude messaged Jason from Further Seems Forever to basically try to like, through him, get to us to let us know that he still wants our autograph.
Oh my God.
So at that point, that's when I'm like, all right, you know what? This is getting completely fucking out of hand. So I got to fucking do something about this shit. So that's when I send a group message over to Dusty and Sam. And I'm like, hey, have you guys gotten any messages? And by the way, I had noticed that, because I went and a while back, I went and stalked that dude's page. And I saw that he had befriended Dusty and Sam. So he was friends with them on Facebook. Because they probably just figured, oh, it was the guy that maybe just liked our band. And they probably just being nice and accepted his friend request. But anyway, so I messaged them and I'm like, hey, have you guys gotten any messages from this dude? And I gave him his name. And they were like, yeah, dude, this guy will not leave me the fuck alone. Like, he keeps asking me to send him like fucking something with our autograph and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Cause he's been harassing not only the band page, but he's been harassing me. He's fucking starting to reach out to people that we played in bands with fucking years ago. Like he's out of line. Oh, and also he not only messaged Jason, but sometime before that he had messaged Danny, who played guitar with us for a while, who was on the Somewhere in America album, who was still a good friend of mine. He even messaged him, knowing that he was an ex-guitar player of ours, messaged him the same fucking thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So basically I unblocked the dude and I had to send him this message basically being like, look, man, while we appreciate your enthusiasm and the fact that you supposedly love our band and your kids supposedly love our band, like at this point it's become harassment. Like, you're inappropriately reaching out to people that are not affiliated with our band whatsoever. And people are starting to get uncomfortable and starting to get concerned. So like, I basically had to threaten like pressing charges for harassment because this dude was just completely out of line.
Where does he live? Where does he live in the country, I guess, before you go on?
I can't remember. It's either like Colorado or
okay.
I don't know. He doesn't live in the state we live in. He lives in a different state. But
so what was his response?
I sent him that message and then I just blocked him again, just so I didn't have to get a response. I'm like, I'm done with him. I'm done with this guy. So then he sends a message to the Dynamite Boy page and is basically like super apologetic. Like, I'm so sorry, tell Adrian that I'm sorry. Cause he couldn't respond back to me cause I blocked him. So he's, it's like, I'm not going to message anyone anymore, but tell Adrian I'm sorry. And I won't be contacting anyone. So like, it's funny because this dude was definitely up to something where he was trying to use his kids to basically get autographs from bands, because even our drummer, Sam, he at one point went and stalked his page and saw that the dude was posting pictures of letters that he had his daughters write to other bands asking for
Oh,
the same thing.
oh wow.
Yeah.
So real quick, you do realize, and I could leave this part out, you do realize that if this, because when this comes out, I mean, I just freely say, hey, I put it out, like, if, whoever interviewed, if you guys want to share it, please do so, or whatever. So if this happens to be something that's out there and people are passing it around, because there's a decent amount of people who listen to this podcast, there might be a chance that this guy listens to this episode, and there might be a chance that this guy listens to this part. Are you cool with that? Because that kind of might fire something up.
I'm cool with that because I specifically chose not to use his name.
Okay.
I
But I'm
didn't
saying,
say
like, I
his
mean,
name once.
he just might be listening to this and might be like, they're fucking talking about Marina. Like, who knows, like, where this guy's at? But I wanted to throw that out there just so you're comfortable with me posting it, because I will post this. But I just wanted to say, like, just so you're cool, because it's a
Yeah.
great story. But who knows what fucking people are like. That's also why I
Yeah.
asked, where does he live? Because if it's like, oh, he's down the street, I'd be like, yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I would have taken it this far if that dude lived in my town.
Does he
So
look like an intimidating guy?
no, no. I mean, honestly, he does. He looks harmless. He's. It's not like he was lying about having kids. He clearly has kids in the pictures on his Facebook page. But I think the dude was just really like obsessed and very desperate to get like stuff signed by bands that he was willing to fucking do whatever he needed to get a hold of people.
So
I think just socially he didn't really understand
it was too
what
much.
that he was crossing a line.
It has it. So after that, like, message to you guys, like, has that just been like it's just done and nothing else, no more
Yeah.
communication? And how recently was this? We're like,
Oh, this was last week, dude.
so you message. That's that's wild that the timing of this interview and that fucking happening. I bet. Did you have for some like now that I'm thinking about it, when I messaged Jeremy, or no, I'm sorry, I'm not Jeremy. I messaged Monkey and I asked him for a couple connections, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I know Adrian." When he contacted you, did you kind of have like a wait a minute, is this like a an approach from that guy kind of feeling?
No,
Oh, okay.
because I hadn't heard anything from that dude in a while. So like there was I didn't even have that thought in my mind. It was literally like a week or so after Monkey had contacted me about this interview that
That's
that dude started showing up again and messaging people.
See, if I was you, I would have probably started putting pieces together like, wait a minute, shit, is this guy who I'm about to interview with like part of this whole like thing?
Nah,
Wow.
I wouldn't have tried to put those two things together. I mean, I trust Monkey.
Okay. Well, I'm not, by the way. So on the record, I'm not.
Yeah,
Fuck, man. Damn.
it's crazy. Even after all these years, we still have fans that are reaching out to us doing these types of things.
Things like that, or things that are just like, hey, like,
Well, I mean, just fans in general that still message us. You know what I mean?
yeah. But like
But
in a,
this,
hi, how are you
this is
doing?
a whole other level. This is something that I never thought we would have ever experienced when we were an active band,
Oh man, I
and we're
wonder.
experiencing it when we haven't been a band in fucking years.
See, like, I never thought that that would have been a thing for it never even crossed my mind that the bands who were in our scene, and there's different levels of where bands went. I mean, I would think more like Fall Out Boy status, where they're like all over the world on MTV, on MTV is even a thing, like, the radio and shit like that. They probably have that's opening up a bit more of an aggressive fan approach. But from just like touring around, and like you guys had some big shows and like and big tours and things like that, but that's amazing that it blows my mind that that would be something to happen to any band from that wasn't, like I said, that Fall Out Boy radio status.
Yeah,
Not to shit on you guys, and not saying like you guys weren't big, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah, no,
Okay.
I 100% agree. Yeah, it's bizarre, dude.
Jesus. I wonder if there's like any more people that I've talked to that have had that happen. No one's ever said anything like that.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, probably from this guy, honestly.
Wow. I'm trying to think if like we ever had anything like that. I think we did have a kid who was, and then we were like small, like, small scale, but I think we did have some kid who was like kind of into that. So like, yeah, on a small scale, who was like overly messaging us. Wow. That
Yeah.
was I love these interviews because there's always that story that comes out that I'm just like, I didn't think that would be, I never saw that coming. That's
Yeah.
fucking amazing. Shit, man. Well, I mean, so on that note, I gotta wrap this up, but this has been great, man. I really appreciate you coming on and like, talking about all this shit.
Absolutely, man.
All right, so I just
I feel bad because there's definitely more stories that are just random side stories from like tours and stuff, but like every band's got a ton of stories. I mean, we could literally talk for hours about all the shit we went through, but like I think it's I appreciate that like you allowed me to like vocally take a trip down memory lane and kind of like think about these things now. But I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to someone recently. I'm not gonna say they were, I forget how long ago. It was kind of recent. He reached out to me because he had an idea about doing a podcast. He's like, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And so we're talking about it, and he goes, one of the reasons I actually want to talk to you is because he's like, I've done interviews before. He's like, but for some reason, after yours, he's like, I've had people, like a lot of people, genuinely sending me just these heartfelt messages um, from that time. And he's like, and it honestly blows my mind. He's like, so you guys, he's like, you have a fan base or are listening, your listeners are really genuinely passionate about stuff. So I have a feeling that if that's the case, I'm guessing it might have happened with more people I've talked to. So in saying that, I'm guessing that just watch your page then, because I think that people might reach out and be like, "Holy shit!" Like, you guys were great, and probably
Absolutely.
throw some love your way. That
I'm excited to promote this conversation because shit, I don't even remember the last interview we've done that was even like that's even out there still. That's like a video or audio of video, or a interview of Dynamite Boy. So it's going to be cool to have something new to like for people to listen to about the history of the band and like what things that we went through and stuff. So like, yeah, dude, I think your podcast, your interviews they're fucking great because it allows people to go back and remember the bands that they fucking loved and hear things that maybe they didn't know about those bands. I mean, I still have interviews that I want to go back and listen to that you've done with people. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to let people hear this, and which I want to ask you, like, how do you or when do you want me to promote this? Like, I didn't want to say anything to anyone until.
Yeah, yeah, and I always just do. It's always a surprise, but I do a teaser. I do a video teaser on Instagram. I share it on Facebook as well and Twitter on the Monday before every launches on Friday. So I think yours is going to come out in a month because I've got episode 100 launches next Friday because that was when I was editing today. And then once I get over that hump of being like, because the 100th episode was like, I was like, this is just too much. Like, I don't know the fuck I want to get. Like, I just want to just like, get back and just interviewing people without this like pressure. So,
Yeah,
but the ones that are leading up to yours, they're like, I'm really excited about all of them. And like, you're in the mix of all this stuff. Like, it's now from the hundreds moving on. It's almost me starting at zero again and moving forward with like another 100 to do. But, it's just like I'm really excited about that. So you're gonna be, I think, like a month from us talking today. But that Monday before, I'll launch it and I'll tag you and I'll like tag you as I'll be like, like I'll just tag you. So you'll know. And then like Monday, Thursday will be the teasers. And then Friday's the launch. So you'll know about a week, that week
cool,
that's leading up to it. Yeah. So
awesome, man.
cool. But yeah, I appreciate what you said though, also, by the way. That's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's fucking
Yeah.
great.
All right, man. Well, two things before we close this up. One, what would you like to plug? It could be either about something you're doing, something that it's related to Dynamite Boy, or it could just be something that you want to just give someone else a spotlight and say you should go check this out.
Well, I mean, I can definitely give a spotlight to Sam, our drummer. He's in a band now called Black Books. They're a local band here. They're really fucking good. He's been playing with them for a while. Myself, honestly, I don't. I did have a band for a bit, but right now I'm just working on my own personal music. There's nothing that I've released. I'm basically just kind of working on my own shit. But more than likely there'll be stuff I'll release down the road. I don't know if it'll be just under my own name or under if I'm gonna have an actual like artist name or whatever the case is. But uh, it'll be something. I'll put out. I've been wanting to put out my own shit just as like a solo artist. That'll come at some point.
Okay. Well, when it does, message me and just be like, "Hey, this is out," and I can post it on like my Instagram and stuff.
For sure.
All right, man. So, all right. So, last question: what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Scene ethics. Honestly, I think it's just staying true to like who you are, man. But that's because that's what Dynamite Boy did. You know what I mean? We kind of talked about that. Like, we never wanted to change who we were because the direction of what the scene was going in. Like, that's always how I've been too. Is when it comes to music and being passionate about what I do as a writer, as a musician, like I've always done what I just want to do that makes me happy. I don't write music. I don't play music that that I think people are going to want to hear. I write stuff that I like, that I enjoy playing. That's the one thing that's stuck with me about just staying true to who you are and what you're passionate about when it comes to music. So that's really what stuck with me this whole time.